Let's review energy starting with the water cycle. So the main source of energy that drives the water cycle is the sun. That's what starts the evaporation process. Water that absorbs into the soil is called groundwater. And that happens after precipitation. When water evaporates into the atmosphere from plants, this is called transpiration. When liquid water absorbs heat energy and turns into a gas or water vapor, that's called evaporation. That starts with the heat energy from the sun, and then it goes from a liquid to a gas as water vapor through evaporation, and then water travels back into rivers, lakes, or streams. That's called runoff. That happens after precipitation. And when a gas or water vapor loses heat energy, so that means it's going to cool, and it turns into liquid water droplets. So it cools, condenses, and this is how clouds are formed. That's our 3 C's: cools, condenses, and forms clouds. That's called condensation. And the key word is cooling. Any form of water that falls back to the surface of the earth is called precipitation. And water that gathers together in large bodies such as the ocean is called accumulation. So these are the main key vocabulary words for the water cycle. So the difference in evaporation and condensation. I'm going to put an E for evaporation and a C for condensation. Begins with radiation from the sun. That would be evaporation. Boiling water is an example of evaporation. Liquid turning into a gas would be an example of evaporation, and that happens with radiation from the sun. Water vapor loses heat energy, so that means it's cooling. That's condensation. Liquid on the outside of your cold glass, we've got coldness going on, so we're losing heat energy. That's condensation. Forms clouds. There's your C. That's condensation. Water molecules expanding. Well, water molecules would expand because heat energy is added, so that would be evaporation. Clothes drying in the sun. That's evaporation. A foggy mirror would be condensation, where it turns from water vapor back to a liquid water droplet. Water vapor molecules contracting. That happens when they cool or lose heat energy. That's condensation. And then water gains heat energy. That means it's warming up. That's evaporation. And if I change gas back into a liquid, that would be an example of condensation. So expand and contract. When an object gains heat energy, so that means it gets warmer, the molecules that make up that object begin to speed up and spread out. And this is called expand. And then when objects lose heat energy, so they're going to be cooling down, the molecules that make up that object will begin to slow down and come together. This is called contract. This is true except for water. Water is the exception to the rule. Water actually expands when it loses heat energy or is cooled. Think about your water pipes in the winter. The water, when it cools, it turns into a solid. It expands in the winter and it can burst your water pipes. So I'm going to put E for expand, and that's when we add heat energy. So we're adding heat here. And C would be for contract. This is when we're going to lose heat energy. And for that one, I'm going to put if it cools. So a balloon shrinks after it's been placed in the freezer. That's contracting. The dent in a ping pong ball smooths out after it's placed in hot water. The molecules are expanding. There are cracks in the sidewalk, so the concrete won't crack in the summer. That's when it's hot. That's from expansion or expanding. My back porch door is difficult to open in the summer when it's hot. That would be expand. Water pipes burst in the winter. We just talked about that. It's contracting when it's cold. And a glass jar of pickles is easier to open after running it under hot water. If we run it under hot water, the molecules expand and it makes it looser, so it's easier to open the jar. Your tires deflating in the winter when it's cold would be an example of contract. All right, heat transfer by direct contact or touch, that's an example of conduction, direct contact. So these are the types of heat transfer. When heat is transferred by electromagnetic rays or waves, that's radiation. That usually happens when heat travels through space, and that's usually with sun or fire, something you're not actually touching. And then if heat is transferred by the rising and sinking of liquids and gases, so all the liquids in one area or all the gases are going to transfer heat, or all of it's going to warm up, that is convection. Anytime you're heating liquids or gases. So let's look at some examples. We're going to go through a few of these, and then you're going to do some on your quizzes questions. Melting ice, an ice cube in your hand. That would be an example of conduction because it's touching. Energy from the sun warming your face. Well, that's coming from the sun. That's radiation. You're not touching the sun. A warm brownie melting ice cream. That's through touch, so that would be conduction. Warming your dinner in a microwave. Microwave ovens use heat, or they transfer heat through radiation. They radiate heat out in very fast form to warm your food. If I heat the entire house, that is going to be my rising of warm air and sinking of cool air, and that's going to be my convection because that's the gases in the house. All the air is warming up. If I warm my hand near a light bulb, I'm not actually touching it. That is an example of radiation. And then the rest of these you're going to practice in your quizzes questions. Conductors and insulators. Conductors, we're going to use a C for conductors and an I for insulators. So materials that allow heat to flow through them easily, that would be a conductor. Materials that do not allow heat to flow through them easily would be an insulator. They insulate the heat and don't allow it to flow quickly. Speeds up the transfer of heat, that's a conductor. Slows it down would be an insulator. Rubber is an insulator. Copper is a conductor. It's a type of metal. Plastic would be a good insulator, and iron would be a type of metal, so that's a conductor. A wooden cooking spoon allows me to cook without burning my hand. It insulates the heat and doesn't allow it to flow through the wood quickly, so it doesn't burn my hand. An iron pan allows my food to heat up quickly. That's a conductor because it's heating up fast. Okay, we're going to leave the other two for your quizzes questions. And let's talk about heat transfer. So if I place a cold ice cube in a warm glass of water, the heat is going to transfer from the warm glass of water, so I'm going to put the warm water, to the cold ice. So it's going from hot to cold until the temperature is the same. So when the warm glass of water and the cold ice cube are the same temperature, there's no more heat transfer in between them. So it's going to continue to transfer from the warm water to that cold ice until both objects are the same temperature. So I sit a hot bowl of soup on the counter to cool. The heat is going to transfer from the hot soup to the cooler air or the atmosphere around it until the soup is the same temperature. So when they become the same temperature, we're not going to transfer heat anymore. The soup is the same temperature. as the air around it. Okay? All right, we're going to stop right there, and in our next video, we will do a little quick intro to forces and motion. So go answer questions about energy.